Last time, my associates and I dared to cover most Spider-Man games that were released on handheld consoles. And like the Master Chief, I need to go into credit sleeve for a bit in order to finish the fight by now covering every console Spider-Man game to be released. So with that out of the way, let's once again enter the world of Spider-Man games with Spider-Man for the Year 2.
The Atari 2600. While not the first game console to grace homes, this was one of the earliest examples of trying to take the classic arcade experience and bringing that into your living room. Results varied, but just like today, every market back then was eager to capitalize off the success of pop culture, and what better icon to strangle some of that sweet monetary web fluid out of than everybody's favorite wall crawler, Spider-Man. Here come the Parker brothers, ready to give us the very first video game where you can take control of the Spooder-Dooder. The concept of this game is simple. Well, I mean, it was the 2600, so it kinda had to be. The Green Goblin has set up super bombs on several buildings across New York City, and Spidey needs to scale up the concrete jungle to defuse them. Your goal is to reach the top, take out the super bombs, and collect as many points as you can. Yeah, back in the day, most games didn't really have much in terms of plots or stories, no matter how simple. They had concepts. The driving force of these experiences was just perpetually cycling through the same actions, trying to reach a high score rather than progressing any sort of narrative. Your whole purpose for playing was how much you wanted to see that number go up. Because Lord knows it wasn't the gameplay. Kudos, I suppose, for attempting to capture the allure of web swinging back in 1982, but it comes at the price of logic and control. See, while Spider-Man can stick to walls in this title, he seems to have forgotten how to move his arms and legs around, so instead of the wall crawler crawling a wall, you use the one and only button on the joystick to shoot out a web towards whatever direction you're holding the stick in. Release the button to detach the web and you can push up to move towards that web's anchor point. Be careful though, because if your web is released on anything colored blue, including windows, the web won't attach and it will send the old webhead down to the ground, doing his best Gwen Stacy impression. Shooting off the surface of the building makes sense. It's not like you can attach webs to the sky. I mean, what do you think this is, the first movie game? Or something modern? But the windows? I'm pretty sure his webs can stick to glass. Well, maybe the idea is that the windows are all open. I mean, you have these goons popping their dumb little heads out of every single one of them every few seconds, so sure, I guess. They can't really do anything to you, but they can block the path of your webs. That said, if you attach a web above them and have Spidey cross their path, you can defeat them when refill your web gauge. Same with these smaller bombs scattered around the top of the building. Which, oh yeah, you have limited web fluid, so if you shoot too many webs without refilling, what about the Green Goblin? I mean, he can't really do anything to you directly. He just moves back and forth across the top of the screen and can cut off your path if he makes contact with you or your webs. Get past him and you just have to position yourself in such a way that you can pass through the path of this air duct. Wait, that's not an air duct? That's supposed to be a super bomb? Yeah, all right. And by making contact with it, the device is taken out of commission and you're on to the next stage with less web fluid, faster enemies, and taller buildings. That right there is the entire game. There probably is more to say about this game, but fishing for that sounds like work, and now's not the time. As for a rating, per Dave's request, 1 out of 5. Don't waste your time. As if everybody just has a working Atari lying around anyway.
Hey everyone, I'm coming out of retirement for a bit just to help out Akide's history of Spider-Man. I have 3 to look at in a short amount of time, so let's get a move on. First are the Questprobe games. These are text adventure games with pictures, as you had to type in what to do in order to move on. You would either succeed and move on to the next area, or you would fail and die like getting impaled by a bunch of spikes on the wall. The first one was with the Hulk, the second one was with Spider-Man, and the last one was with the Human Torch and the Thing. Since these games are very similar, I'm just gonna take a look at the Spider-Man one. I'd also be playing the ZX Spectrum version, as that's the one I got working. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, this is when games used to come on cassette tapes, and it took a while to load. So when it's done loading right around the time you got your Hot Pockets done, your goal is to stop the villains and get all the Power Gems. Not Infinity Gems, the Power Gems. It's supposed to be for score, that's about it. And I didn't get that very far. I mean, I did find a few gems, as well as some chemicals to try to make some web fluid, but I didn't know how to make web fluid. I did encounter the lizard who really likes the color green, and I tried to punch him in the face, but it didn't work. But the guy wasn't doing anything, so I just left him alone. I also found the ringmaster, but he told me to piss off, which I had no choice to do. So in the end, I couldn't figure out what to do. I mean, I did take a look at the manual, but I didn't know if I needed to do something first, or if it gave off the wrong message. In the end, I just suck at these text adventure games. But I did get to see what happens if Spider-Man dies. Take a look at that, kids! Your favorite superhero's a pile of ash! Alright, I'm a big liar, Pants. He's not a pile of ash, he's just been sent to limbo. But these text-adventure games were just the start of Marvel games before the age of platforming and joysticks. So let's swing on over to the Atari ST games. Next up is Spider-Man and Captain America in Dr. Doom's Revenge. You switch from Spider-Man and Captain America as it's a boss rush game, where you go from boss to boss as it leads up to the final encounter with Dr. Doom. Now there is a comic that's a prequel to the game, but I don't have one with me and I'm too lazy to look it up. I was able to play this one with the joystick, and the controls are a little awkward to say the least. It depends on what angle the joystick is when you're attacking. Holding it at a diagonal upward position will attack up, and holding it at a diagonal downward position will attack down, and going left or right depending on where your character facing punches forward. By the way, I don't suggest turning around as it takes forever to do it. If you need to go back, just backflip your way back to position and you'll be fine. As for throwing your shield or shooting your webs, you have to hold up to shoot, or you hold down for shooting low. As for which one you should use, it mostly depends on what boss you're fighting. There are also superhero challenges, where you have to dodge fireballs, missiles, or jump over stalagmites. These levels are tedious and take some time to complete. But if you manage to pull off without getting hit once, you get a little bit more health back that you lost. And trust me, you're gonna need it, because this game is hard for all the wrong reasons. Now yes, I was able to beat this game, but it mostly depends on what you need to do to beat each boss. For example, Oddball. Yeah, he keeps blocking your shield throw, but you just stun lock him in a diagonal upward position, he'll go down quickly. And Machete does a lot of damage when he's close up, but just keep a distance and shoot webs at him until he goes down. And once you figure out how to win each fight, you'll find out that this game isn't very long. And yes, it can be frustrating since there are no continues. It took me like 4 to 5 hours to complete it. But without the retries, it takes about 30 minutes to win the game. So it's kinda like an arcade game. Except there are no continues, and you have to start all over again, which creates trial and error, which does not make a good game. But at least it's short and simple once you know what to do. In the end, this game has a lot of problems, but it's just very average. But let's move on to the main attraction. The Amazing Spider-Man, released in 1990, and this one is even worse than Dr. Doom's Revenge. Well, there might be another game worse than this, but I'll talk about that later. Mysterio has kidnapped Mary Jane in the movie studio, and Peter has to suit up to save her, along with dealing with broken controls and having random seizures. Peter. Oh, Peter. Oh, Peter. Peter, what are you doing? Yep, you'll be going through 7 stages of painful level design, followed by irritating puzzles and enemies you can't fight back. But you can web them to stun them for a few seconds, at least there's that. Like Dr. Doom's Revenge, you point a joystick in the direction you want to use your web, but you have to be very precise with it. I swear, you can't be a centimeter off when you're shooting. Oh, and by the way, even your enemies are webbed and stunned, they can still hurt you, as you get to see Spider-Man being skinned from the foot up to the top of his head as he takes damage. Seriously, what is with old Marvel PC games and scarring children by sending their favorite heroes to limbo or having their flesh peeled off? No joke, this game took me hours to beat it. And now it's mostly because of trial and error and how long each level is. Yeah, DDR had problems, but at least the game's short. By the way, I had to backtrack a few times just to get a door to open or disappear. And if you die halfway through the level, you have to start all over again. But at least one thing that DDR didn't have was checkpoints, so you don't have to start from the beginning. But trust me, it's very irritating when you're almost done with the level, but then something kills you, and then you gotta start from the beginning of that level. And some of these levels took me about an hour to complete, all because I screwed up a puzzle, or I swung at the wrong time, and I end up burning in a fire. Oh, I take it back. This one was the most annoying part. It happens in level 4. We had to shoot a button at the right time in order for a floor to disappear, for a giant rat to press a button, but you have to make sure he doesn't die in a fire, because if he does, you screwed up the puzzle, there's no way to bring it back, and you gotta commit suicide and start the level all over again. I guess if you don't have a lot of time to kill, I guess you can try this out, but I wouldn't recommend it. I would recommend DDR over this trash. I mean, there is a glitch I can try to pull off that lets you beat the game in 18 seconds, but it is not worth it. Now, I do have an upcoming video where I take a full look at this along with DDR and 2 other Marvel games, as I plan on talking about the rest of the lineup soon. But that's all I have to say about the old Marvel Spider-Man games, as we go back to Aki Dave. Take it away, Dave!
Developed by Bit Studios and published by LJN, Spider-Man Return of the Sinister Six on the NES is a true test of will. A game that's so bad that every problem that the game has can be seen in just the first level, and if you can somehow manage to get further, it just gets worse. Let's start with the gameplay. Moving Spider-Man is tiring due to how stiff he is, and when you try to attack enemies, you can barely get a hit on them. For a guy who's flexible, jumping seems to be an issue because he drops like a rock, or if you're lucky, he can do a pathetic long jump, which is pretty useless. It's so useless that he slams into an invisible wall whenever you perform a long jump, and you can't even move while airborne. There's also this input lag that makes the game feel way slower than it does already. Speaking of horrible hit detection, apparently that doesn't apply to enemies because they can attack you with no issue, which is a huge red flag considering that the game wants you to beat it with only 2 lives. This means that you'll take unnecessary damage to get an upper hand, but it'll just end up with you seeing the game over screen at a faster pace. There's no point in trying to actually get good because all of these issues are from a hardware perspective. There's input lag and a broken hit detection, which makes going through the first boss a near impossibility. Even something simple as wall crawling and going up ropes and ladders rarely work, which can lead you to getting soft blocked on multiple occasions. At this point, it would just be better to show you how a typical boss battle goes, so watch that while I go grab a new case of Tylenol or something. Yeah, it's something else. Anyway, the only real positives I can give is that the game looks pretty normal for an NES game. The sprites and models aren't terrible, although I have no idea why Spider-Man has blue eyes instead of white eyes, well, whatever. The music is repetitive, but not horrible, and I think it's cool that each level has its own title card, which is pretty cool. This game gets a 1 out of 5, but we're not out of the woods yet, so let's take a look at the Sega Master System port of the game and hope for the best. Developed once again by Bit Studios and published by Flying Edge, this version of the game is actually way more bearable than the version on the NES. The game looks better, the music sounds better, and a lot of the technical issues are done away with completely, or at least made more bearable. Although things like the non-existent hit detection and stiff controls rear their ugly heads, which makes this version of the game a slight improvement of one of the worst games ever played, and I've played Werewolf the Apocalypse Earthblood. Despite all of that, I was at least able to get up to the Mysterio level, and wow, So take all the issues I've mentioned so far and now add unfair enemy placements and a Virtual Boy color palette that strains your eyes. After somehow getting through all of that with barely any health, I was unable to beat Mysterio, because of the ass beating I took a bit ago. And with that, I stopped recording footage of the game. This is the third time I've covered this game, and while this version fixed some of the issues that made the NES version unplayable, the game is so broken that its solutions cause more problems. Sure, I can at least get further than the NES version, but its stiff controls don't match with the rise in difficulty. But because it attempted to do and be better, I'll give this game a 2.5 out of 5. Developed by Technopop and published by Sega, Spider-Man vs. the Kingpin on the Sega Master System is the definition of a mixed bag. I really dig the game's art style and how Spider-Man has this gloss that allows him to stand out. I enjoy the fact that the levels have layers, so swinging is actually useful when taking down enemies and traversing environments. You can stand on the ground, the railings, and even the sewer water in the lizard stage. Wall crawling is not utilized that much, but the intro level has you crawling into a window, and that's way more effort than the entirety of Spider-Man Return of the Sinister 6. I fucking hate that game. Bosses provide a decent challenge, but they also have these exploits which can end fights in seconds. But the coolest thing about the game is that Doctor Strange makes a cameo which hints at a larger universe. Spider-Man and Doctor Strange in the same game while fighting members of the Sinister Six.
Hello, Peter.
But despite it being pretty cool, the game has a share of problems and woof. The game is structured weirdly. While there's a time limit, the levels are pretty short, so the time limit feels arbitrary. But the time limit is actually a replacement for health items, because once you complete a level, you can sacrifice that time limit for health, which brings a level strategy to the game. The problem is that the game has an awful habit of getting you stung by enemies, which can lead you to dying over and over again. Once you die, you're booted back to the main menu, and you have to start the game all over again, which makes the game's focus on strategy pretty much useless because you could lose all your progress by getting stun locked, which happens more than you think. The worst case of stun locking is the Electro level, so apparently you have to turn off 3 to 4 switches in order to fight Electro, but in reality, if you dare to turn off any of the switches, you'll get assaulted endlessly by lightning bolts on both ends until you die. But if you're lucky enough to turn off one of these switches, you'll only have a couple of seconds before getting stun locked again. I kept getting back to this level and kept getting stun locked for hours upon hours, and with that ended my recording. While this game has a lot going for it, the stun locking and the weird level structure ruin it. So this game gets a 2.9 out of 5. Thank you all for watching. I want to thank Boss and Leocrit for joining me on my asinine journey to play all of these games. And this officially begins the second year of Spider-Man for the... I never thought that I'd get this far in covering these games, and that's thanks to everyone who's joined me on this project. I can't wait to check out the rest of the games on this list, and that includes the amazing Spider-Man 2 of all things. So, woof. I'd like to thank my patrons, Leocrit, Hachi, and Retro Warrior for supporting the channel, and for $1 a month, your name can show up right here. Happy holidays everyone, and of course, love you guys and shamalamamoomoo.